Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. We are meeting to consider and to deliberate on vote 9, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, as pertained in the schedule to the Western Cape Adjustments Appropriation COVID-19 Bill. And I wish to welcome each and every one of you. Thank you for being here. A particular word of welcome to the Minister of Local Government, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, Minister Anton Bradell, to our Head of Department, Mr. Piet van Zyl. I trust he is here as well. And also the CEO of Cape Nature, Dr. Razina Umar, other officials and others in attendance. I would appreciate an opportunity for the members to introduce themselves. I'm Andrikus van der Westhuizen, Chairperson of the committee. And if the members could just quickly introduce themselves also to the meeting.
Matlodi Mbaseko, member of the committee.
Deirdre Bartman, member of the committee.
Pat Moran, member of the committee.
And Brett Heron, member of the committee.
Danville Smith.
Additional member. Thank you. Alternate member. Thank you so much. And Minister, I would appreciate it if you could introduce yourself, your delegation, and then progress by just informing us about the implications of this bill for your department.
Honourable Chair, I'm Anton Bradell, MEC responsible for local government, environmental affairs, development planning. I'm going to ask my officials, the team that's present, to just introduce themselves. So, quick, you can continue.
Thank you, Minister. Chairperson, good afternoon, and members. Piet van Zyl, the head of department. We've got in the meeting my colleagues, and I'm going to quickly just run through the list. I think it might be quicker than doing the round robin. We've got Anwar Ghafoor, Ayub Mohammed, Gerard Gerber, Gottlieb Arendse, Johannes Fritz, Joy Lena, Karen Shippey, Kobus Monroe, Marius Durant from the Ministry, Dr. Razina Omar and Mohammed Bayat from Cape Nature, and then Olivia Samuels, my CFO, as well as Ronald Mukanya and Rudolf van Jasveld and Shiraz Ismail and Tafsir Abbas.
Thank you so much, Mr. van Zyl. And yes, thank you for trying to save time. This meeting is scheduled only until 16:30, so I appreciate all efforts for us to deal with this efficiently. Minister, would you like to make some introductory remarks, or can we go straight to the presentation?
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, and to the honourable members. It's my pleasure to present the adjusted estimates for the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning 2020. This includes Cape Nature. Colleagues, we are in uncharted water. We find one another here at a time when we have lost thousands of people to a virus that is wreaking havoc across the world. A virus that has also led to significant challenges here in the Western Cape. I want to thank my colleagues and the Premier for the efforts that they have gone in over the past 6 months. I believe you can all hold your heads up high. You have done everything you could You have done everything you could do in your power to ensure that the people in our province are as well looked after as they can. In addition, looking at other provinces, it is indeed in times of crisis that one sees if the foundation is made out of rock or sand. Years of doing the hard work has helped this province to be able to mobilize and overcome the many challenges this virus has thrown at us. It has meant that we could rely on our structures to see us through the storm. I am thankful for that today. We know, however, that none of this came easily or cheaply, and so I find ourselves having a pause in another just budget. This response is particularly aimed at the public health priority of saving lives while maintaining fiscal stability. I will give you a brief overview of the changes and effects on the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. This department remains one of the smallest in the provincial government and, similar to other departments, has been hit with continued budget constraints over the past few years. Honourable Chair and Honourable Members, if I may remind ourselves, this department has received clean audits for a number of years. This is but one measure of showing that the money we get is spent wisely. Despite the cut to funding that we are making, we will, of course, do what we can to ensure the impact on service delivery, even during the period under review, remains as minimal as possible. Honourable Chair, the original appropriation for vote 9, which include the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning and the public entity Cape Nature, is 628,847,000 rand. The COVID-19 first adjusted budget we are tabling now will realize a reduction of 8,921,000 rand, which reduced the allocation to 611,926,000 rand. Cape Nature continued to with various reprioritization exercises and scenario planning since the lockdown, since severely impacted the tourism revenue collection. The uncertainty of the tourism revenue collection ability therefore resulted in maintaining Cape Nature original allocation of 302,187,000 rand, with the effect that the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning effectively carries the 8,921,000 rand reduction. The reduction of 8,921,000 rand is achieved through reprioritization of funds on the budget. These include savings on mainly all travelling and substance-related expenditures, training and workshops, catering and consultant services. This is the first response from the Western Cape government in dealing with the resource requirements associated with COVID-19, crafted against the background of various uncertainties and modelling, mainly dealing with the immediate aim of saving lives. And with those few words, I table the department's latest adjustment budget. I thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, MEC. Mr. Van Zyl, can I hand over to you?
Chairman, thank you. I think that in addition to those high-level overview remarks by Minister Brodell, I'm going to just make a few remarks, and then I'm in fact going to ask Chief Financial Officer Olivia Samuels to take the Standing Committee through the brief presentation. Firstly, I think just to contextualize that we all appreciate the fact, I think, that we're in very unique or special circumstances. This year, we're going to have two adjustment budgets. This is being the first adjustment budget, and then there will be the second one, more or less at the time that we usually have the adjustment budget, around October, late October, November. So this time round, it's been a state process that we've been through internally within the department. Firstly, Cape Nature in their component, and then collectively as Vote 9. And we've had to make 3 stages of submissions to Provincial Treasury over the last 6 weeks. culminating just over 2 weeks ago with a technical engagement between Vote 9, the department, and Cape Nature with the Provincial Treasury. At that engagement, Chair, we put in, and I'm going to suggest to you that after the presentation that Olivia is going to take the committee through, that Rosina and Mohammed from Cape Nature perhaps just give a high-level overview. The reason I'm suggesting that is the Provincial Treasury listened to our submission and our plea, as it were, that Cape Nature, and we'll get a slight unpacking of that by Rosina and Mohammed, are taking quite a serious knock, of course, as a consequence of the lockdown and the fact that the facilities in the nature reserves were in lockdown until very recently. In fact, the accommodation facilities largely still are. The projection at this point in time is that Cape Nature is probably going to take a knock in terms of reduced revenue of 40 to 50%, but they will elaborate on that a little later. So I think the important thing for today's engagement then is that Provincial Treasury listened to us and did not require or enforce a reduction situation on the Cape Nature budget for this first adjustment budget. So what you have in front of you today, as Minister has just indicated, is a reduction in the vote of 8.92 million, which is entirely carried or will be entirely carried by the department in its approximately 50% of Vote 9. Chair, I think that we've been able to do that largely as a consequence of COVID, and as will be explained to you in a moment, and as Minister in fact has indicated, the cutbacks that we are able to make largely relate to consequences on our business as a result of COVID. Therefore, far less traveling, firstly, subsistence and accommodation, going away to meetings. I think MS Teams and Zoom platforms have become the new norm for hosting or conducting meetings, business meetings, and I think is probably going to be one of the legacies of the COVID pandemic, possibly to the cost of our airlines, because going forward, I trust that we'll make far more use of this platform rather than traveling all over the countryside, particularly out of the province. Chair, then so I do think that we are able to make these adjustments. We've had to accommodate, and let me also say that, and you'll get some detail. There's of course been extraordinary expenditure related directly to COVID-19, particularly in respect of personal protective equipment, or PPE by its acronym. And within our department, we've got two categories of PPE. A smaller category of specialized equipment, principally for our Environmental Management Inspectorate for compliance inspections, and then the general PPE like sanitizer and masks and the like for the rest of our staff. So, Chair, I think that we also did put a strong position into our engagement with Provincial Treasury to protect our COE, cost of employment budget, and that has survived this first adjustment budget. The process that is happening transversely is that critical posts have been identified and urgent measures are underway to either complete recruitment processes that have already been underway for a while, or to commence processes for critical jobs. So, Chair, I'm going to pause there in having given you that overview and context. In other words, this is the first round, so to speak, the first adjustment budget. We will, and we're not quite sure where that is going to take us, but adjustment budget number 2 will be facing us in the next 2 months or so. So, Chair, with that, I would like to hand over to Ms. Samuels to briefly take your committee through the presentation and overview.
Thank you, Mr. Van Zyl, and thank you, Ms. Samuels. Just the time check, we've got 45 minutes left for our meeting. So please, if you could take us through what I trust would be a high-level overview.
Thank you, Chairperson and members of the committee. Yes, it will be a high-level presentation. It's visible on the screen, then I will proceed, Chairperson, with your permission.
Thank you. We hear you loud and clear, and the presentation is visible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. In terms of the overview, we will just essentially cover, as Minister has already indicated, the adjusted estimate summary resulting in a reduction of 8.9 million on the department's budget. We provide some detail as contained in the bill schedules. Also informed, as HOD has alluded to, in terms of the department's adjustment strategy and how that funding was actually sourced within the department's budget. Item number 4 will be our COVID-19 response as a support department in the Western Cape government. We also indicate, and as Dr. Omar and CFO will elaborate on the Cape Nature's implication from their tourism revenue, and then vote 9 going forward in terms of the remaining phases of this adjustments process. In terms of the high-level overview, as Minister indicated, the original budget of 620.8 million was effectively reduced by 8.9 million, which leaves the department with a remaining budget of 611.9 million. This, in effect, if expressed as a percentage reduction on the original budget, equates to 1.42% of the department's budget. In terms of the detail as provided in the schedules, table 9.1, the payments and estimates per program, we can see that 8.9 million is made up of program 1's administration adjustment of 858,000, program 2 resulting in 215,000, program 3 compliance and enforcement as an adjustment of 404,000, environmental quality management 1.7 million, biodiversity larger amount of 3.8 million, environmental and power services program 6 673,000, and finally program 7 development planning 1.1 million reduction, totaling 8.9 million. In terms of the economic classification, those are essentially, as HOD also indicated, the reductions are coming from the savings realized due to the new working methodology, essentially on our goods and services budget, total adjustment of 9.7 million. This is further complemented by an increase in the payment for capital assets as contained in the table, and we will detail that going further. The total realignment of the department's budget essentially amounts to 11.3 million. The first internal reprioritization of 2.1 million, of which 1.3 million is respect of data connectivity and PPE, personal protective equipment, as HOD also indicated, and another amount of 817,000 for our replacement of an additional IT equipment in terms of new working arrangements. This essentially caters for the cost of compliance in the workplace, mainly OHS regulations and further promulgated regulations, and also through a personal protective equipment for general staff, specialized ones for our EMI inspectors, and also to create an enable remote working environment through infrastructure, connectivity, communication, and collaboration tools. The second aspect, which is essentially the 8.9 billion reflected in the vote, is achieved through reprioritization of funds. Furthermore, this second element also focused on the immediate lockdown savings, which were effected since April of this financial year, and the realization of initiatives primarily associated with alternative working arrangements. These include savings on mainly all-out travel and subsistence-related costs, and also trainings and workshops, as HOD indicated, also with a new way of conducting our business and affairs, and essentially mainly on our catering and consultancy services as well. In terms of this department's COVID-19 response, this being a COVID-19 bill, our department is not a frontline response department. However, as Minister also indicated, performs a critical support role in combating this pandemic in support of other Western Cape government departments. One of these aspects for our department include responding to air pollution causes, which has both long and short-term effects on human health and the environment, and also carries with it a high social, economic, and environmental cost. There is also an increasing trend in ground-level ozone and particulate matter, which especially during this COVID-19 pandemic poses a risk to both human health and particularly so in poverty-stricken areas. In terms of our waste management, it remains a critical service in the interventions to prevent and slow the spread of COVID-19 infections to citizens and the reduction of impacts of waste to human health and the environment in general. From an ecological infrastructure investment perspective, food insecurity, water insecurity, and loss of tourism hotspots have immediate and short to long-term implications on economic and recreation recovery, with added loss of work opportunities, particularly within the EPWP environment. Increasing during this pandemic also is the need for comprehensive environmental and development planning, monitoring and enforcement, which will undeniably be challenged with allocations already under severe strain, as HOD indicated, with more budget cuts even prior to COVID-19. In terms of our entity Cape Nature, as HOD and Minister both indicated, the original budget remains intact for this first rounds of adjustments. Cape Nature, however, continues with their various reprioritization exercises and their scenario planning due to the lockdown severely having impacted on its tourism revenue collection. Due to the uncertainty around this, their budget remains at 302 million, so effectively the department carries the full 8.9 million reduction as seen in the vote. Furthermore, first time in this budget, in this first adjusted budget, COE upper limits were also introduced for public entities. Cape Nature COE upper limit is set at 197.9 million, and this excludes posts funded by conditional grants and the expanded public works program. Chairperson, in conclusion, going forward, Cape Nature's budget, having been excluded from this first adjusted budget, will also be assessed in the second adjusted budget, and the department's 2019-20 rollover and revenue retention request, not being a first COVID response, will be considered as part of the second adjustment budget in November. And that is the presentation in conclusion. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much, Ms. Samuels. Honourable members, the floor is now open for questions. If you could just give me an indication by raising your hand electronically. I see Honourable Smith's hand. I trust there may be others, and I'll give an opportunity later for other people to add. But Honourable Smith, will you lead us? Honourable Smith, have you dropped your hand again?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. Can you hear me, Chair?
We hear you well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation and for the input by the Minister. And good afternoon, colleagues and friends. Just 2 or 3 questions, Chair. Firstly, I would like to understand on page 162 in terms of the realignment of the provincial budget, what were the amounts intended for, and what is the impact of this cut on the functioning of the various programs in the department? And then, Chair, the operational cost, what will the increase be used for? In terms of the operational cost. And then I just want to understand, has the department purchased PPEs? Yes or no? And can we get at least an indication of what has been purchased and how much it cost? And is there any plans to buy more PPEs? And if so, where is the budget going to come from for future purchases of PPEs if the department intend to do so? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Smith. Honourable members, are there any other members who would like to pose questions? Honourable Bartman, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, I would like to thank the Minister and the Department for the presentation today. It's been a very difficult time period during COVID, as well as trying to realign the different budgets. But Chair, mine is not a question, but it's more a concern. On page 161 and 62, obviously the net decrease is 8.9, but part of that net decrease, essentially the decrease of 11 million rand in terms of equitable share to the province, essentially due to the fact that we didn't get any increase in equitable share from national, which is being bolstered by the provincial funding of 2.1 million rand, which was indicated in the slides for the data and the PPE and the IT equipment. It's just concerning for me that that some of the programs on the ground that will really impact on the frontline services of this particular department, given that we've already seen a decrease in the main budget in the beginning of this year. But that is just a concern for me, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize Honourable Maran.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon to all. Chair, yeah, thanks for the opportunity. We are seeing now a reduction of 8.9 million rand. And even at the end of last year, Chair, and we might argue now that, and we've also heard in this morning's meeting, a lot of promises made by national government and not coming through with some of those promises that's been made. But we've seen, Chair, some of these budget cuts, and one of the presenters have mentioned it, even prior to the lockdown of COVID. We have seen it last year where the department and also Cape Nature have surrendered millions of rand to its either treasury or to the Premier's vote for boots on the ground, which were very, very disappointing at that stage. Now, we know, for instance, now that we need to save and also contribute to the Solidarity Fund, and one of the reasons why we had to save. But I've also said in this morning's meeting that it's not all those savings that goes to the Solidarity Fund. Some of these monies will also be surrendered to other departments. Now, Chair, I just want to check, man. I got two questions. The one is on page 170. And also when it comes to this particular program, we have surrendered some of those monies, given the recent spate of illegal land invasions in the province. How safe are our coastal areas and protected by biodiversity areas? Given the fact that we have cut the budget for this particular program. The second one is the continued absence, Chair, also of the environmental commissioner. It makes us actually constitutional delinquents. At what stage are we going to initiate this process to appoint a environmental commissioner. It's basically those two questions, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Maran. Any other members that would like to pose questions? None. Can I just then from my side ask, during a briefing earlier this year, we were told of various infrastructure projects, particularly by Cape Nature. And we know that the lockdown, and particularly the first 5 weeks, were quite disruptive. And my question is just, do you believe that those infrastructure projects could still be implemented within this financial year? Because it seems to me as if the full amounts allocated to those projects are still on the budget. And with that, and there being no further questions, I would like to give back to you, Mr. Van Zyl, or Minister, if you would like to respond.
Chair, can I make a suggestion that I've made a note, and obviously we will respond to those questions. I wonder if you shouldn't allow 5 minutes or so for Cape Nature just to give their overview of the revenue situation, but then also, whilst they're on the floor, they can answer your question about the infrastructure, and then between myself and the CFO, we'll come back to the other 3 sets of questions, if that's in order.
Excellent proposal. Thank you, Mr. Van Zyl. And Dr. Umar, you and your team can take the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, honourable members and colleagues. I'll just give a very brief, quick overview, nothing in addition to what the Minister already mentioned and what the CFO articulated within her presentation. I want to highlight, however, from the 302 million allocation during the MTEF, that is fine, we are accounting for that, but very grave in this regard is the 43 million that we anticipated we would earn from tourism revenue that's not going to materialize. In fact, we have done, and Mohammed Bayat will go into a little bit more detail here, but just in terms of the big overview, we have anticipated that worst case scenario, from that 43 million, we're only likely really to accrue 8 million. Most likely. Worst case, 1 million, and best case, obviously, if we all open right now, which seems to be very unlikely, 23 million. So we in the deficit as we speak, and it is of great concern to us. And we're very grateful in phase 1 of the adjustments not to have incurred further cuts because as we speak, we're bleeding. Something just in addition to also not making the 43 million as anticipated, that's already been factored into our operation budget, is the fact that to date, we already spent something like 3.4 million on PPE due to COVID-19, and we anticipate that is going to increase. So, Chair, notwithstanding that we an entity that look after just under 900 million hectares with thousands of structures and kilometers of road networks, we are bleeding. Mohammed Bayat will give us an overview of the budget, but while I'm on the floor, I can also just say about the land invasions recently that hasn't escaped us. We have been subjected to land invasions at Drift Sands Nature Reserve, and there are additional costs associated with that as well that hasn't been earmarked into our planning at all. So this is in addition to COVID-19, these are additional costs that the entity is carrying currently and will have to carry going forward. Mohammed, over to you.
Thank you very much, CEO. Thank you to all the members. I'm just going to share the screen very quickly. I hope you can all see this. So this is just quickly, I'm just going to go through this very quickly because the CEO has already spoken to it already. But just in terms of this slide, just to show, as the CEO mentioned, we cover the whole width and breadth of the province with nature reserves throughout the province. And like she mentioned, just under 900,000 of hectares under management, and there's a lots of kilometers of roads and structures, etc. Obviously, the perspective before COVID-19, just to show that our, as the minister mentioned in his introduction, we've, as with the department and other departments as well, over the past 5 years, our MTF allocation has not matched inflationary increases. It's been very, very limited. But as it stood, we were 302 million was the MTF allocation, which was 82%, but 12% of our budgeted revenue and expenditure comes from our ecotourism revenue, which is 43 million, and that is under threat. In terms of the next slide, we speak very briefly regarding where that funding is allocated to the different operations. Obviously, primarily 43% for conservation operations and 23% for the ecotourism and access. And obviously, 62% of our is our employee costs. But important for that is we've been consistently, as a public entity, we lower than the public sector average for employee costs as a percentage of expenditure. I think that sits around just over the 70, 75, close to 75%. So we're significantly lower as a public entity. Again, just a more detailed breakdown to show you in the next slide where the costs are allocated. Another significant factor is travel and subsistence, our contractors, ICT costs, especially in light of working from home, and cloud technology is a significant cost as well. And what we did, similar in line with the department and all other departments and entities, we've also looked at where we could save. We identified an amount of approximately 8.9 million. But like the CEO mentioned, we've still got to cover the 43 million, and on top of that, the COVID-19 PPE costs, and now the cost for the land invasion. So those savings are going to be eroded quite quickly, unfortunately. In terms of ecotourism and our own revenue, what's important is that even if we do open up immediately, the outlook out there is that at least 67% of those that were surveyed indicated they don't have any plans for overnight travel under the current regulations. We refunded 1 million rand to date since the start of the lockdown in terms of bookings that we've had to cancel. For 2018-19 financial year, we brought in 2 million rand less than the previous financial year. And our estimate as to what we lost or what we expected to get, even though we did meet our target, but the additional income we would have liked to earn, we lost out around 4 million. Like the CEO mentioned, our initial target was 43 million. Worst case scenario, we'll probably make approximately 1 million. The most likely scenario, if the restrictions on overnight accommodation is lifted, which we can't see, if we're looking at the situation, it's most likely not going to happen. The best case scenario, like the CEO mentioned, is we're forecasting maybe 23 million rand if everything opens up and there's an uptake of demand in terms of of people wanting to travel and use our facilities. What's our plan? I mean, in any event, it's not just about sitting back and just allowing it to happen. We've got a 4-step plan in terms of making sure that we do mitigate the loss and the risks. The first was to identify the savings, but like I mentioned, that is offset by the cost of PPE. We, as an entity, did our an OD process already, and we reprioritized the staff. We've implemented that process, so that should generate some savings together with freezing of vacancies. We've invested heavily in the past year or two, as well as currently in terms of ICT and automation, which will reduce significantly the back office costs, and also the reprioritization of funds, including reserves generated in the prior year. Why is it important for Cape Nature in the current environment? I think, and sometimes this is often forgotten of Cape Nature. Over the past 5 years, we've created 2,781 job opportunities via the EPWP program. That's 86 million rand in salaries to those that are to the rural communities closest to our protected areas. That's really helps people. 4 million rand is also spent on training them and giving them skills that they need. And some of the success stories are quite heartwarming. And in terms of what we spend on our contractors that do the invasive alien clearing, the fire breaks, etc., that creates approximately 8,000, just under 9,000 job opportunities. And over the past 5 years, we spent close to 35 million. just on those programs alone. In terms of the infrastructure, we had invested over the past 5 years 115 million on our infrastructure, and like was mentioned pre-lockdown, we had 17 million rand in commitments, and I can report that contractors are in fields to get these completed, and I think to date we spent around 4 million of that 17 million in getting those infrastructure projects on the go. I think that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And honourable members, are there any questions that emerged from this presentation? You could just indicate by show of hands. Good. Thank you very much then. Thank you. Are there any concluding remarks that you would like to make, Mr. Van Zyl or MEC, before we excuse you if you should want to leave, and I'll then ask the committee to deliberate and take a decision on the bill.
Okay, Chair, if we could very quickly just look at the
other questions.
Your question about the infrastructure, I think I'm going to ask Mohammed perhaps just to answer that, but let me go back to Member Smith's question, which was the PPE, what kind of equipment and at what cost. I'm going to ask Johannes Fritz, the Director of Financial Management, to give you an answer on that. And then also just to give him a heads up, the question from Member Bartman, or a concern rather, about the impact on frontline services within our department. I'm going to ask Ayub Mohammed, because the closest that our department and its mandates and functions get to the front line, so to speak, is through the work of our Environmental Management Inspectorate. So he can very briefly just give you a bit of insight in terms of our role and functions played out there. And then Member Maran posed two questions. The one was how safe for our coastal and biodiversity areas. I'm going to ask Marlene Larosse, our Director of Biodiversity and Coastal Management, to give a quick response on that. And then the second question by Member Maran was the not having a full position of the Environmental Commissioner. How is that impacting or contributing to dealing with the situation? I think that possibly Minister can make that part of his concluding remarks. My general observation is I don't think that at this juncture the Environmental Commissioner, had there been one, would have played any significant role, but that's a personal view. So Chair, if we could quickly just ask Cape Nature to respond on the infrastructure, and then Johannes on the PPE, Ayub on our sort of frontline activity, and Marlene on the coastal and biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Chair, there was during the last month of March, the last month of the financial year, that is during March, when COVID-19 lockdown loomed, we had to get a number of our contractors out of the fields, and it did impact on the delivery of a number of projects. The correct figure, the CFO will provide.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Thank you. I'm going to respond with regard to the PPE. So for the year under review, we just procured PPE just below 200,000. And as indicated by the CFO, these are for the EMIs, our Environmental Management Inspectorate, so specialized PPEs for them, and then the general PPE for the office environment. So these include thermometers, sanitizers, various masks that were purchased. boot covers, disinfectants, disposable protective wear, goggles, facial visors, heavy-duty gloves, latex gloves, surgical masks, disposable aprons. We purchase automatic sanitizer dispensers, further latex gloves. We also purchase the face cloth masks. And then we purchase also various bottles that we utilize to issue to the staff for using the sanitizers and the disinfectant. So our current expenditure for PPE is just below 200,000. As part of the 2.117 million that we indicated earlier, additional provision has been made for PPE to the amount of 495. So that is part of our reprioritization that we made for PPE. The underspending or the saving of the 8.9 million, most of them realized from our operational expenditure, as indicated earlier by the Minister, HOD, and the CFO. So those are in respect of traveling. That's just below 3 million, the saving on the traveling. Catering, about 585, training, another 1.5. So mostly on our operational expenditure, these savings were realized. I thank you.
Thank you. And I think it's now the last response.
Marlene?
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson and honourable members. Just to respond to the impacts of the reductions on the biodiversity and coastal programs, as you know, the department works hand in glove together with Cape Nature in biodiversity and coastal programs. We have a provincial coastal management program as published in 2016 and a biodiversity strategy and action plan which aligns upwards to the national programs. That was also published in 2016. We've had to reduce our spending in terms of implementation on our priority programs. And what we've tried to do is we've tried to delay some of those priority programs and reschedule the spending. Our concern with that is that the MTEF may look bleak as well. And we're concerned as to how that might impact the delivery on the ground of these programs. As you know, we have a significant estuarine management program, and each and every one of those estuaries requires specific attention. Mr. Chair, I just want to refer to your concern about, or the concern that was raised around the invasions, land invasion. I think Dr. Omar has addressed that in terms of the protected areas. I think our protected areas do remain vulnerable to such land invasions, and I think our coastline will be too, insofar as it's a general phenomenon that we're experiencing across the board in the Western Cape. What we are trying to do is to ensure that we have traction with our municipalities in terms of supporting their own municipal coastal programs from the coastal side, where we work also in partnership with those entities. So while the news is not positive and the budget is bleak, we really do depend on the human capacity networks that we've created and curated over the last few years in supporting our implementation of the program. And we will nonetheless move forward, albeit slower, in the implementation of such programs. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, thank you. I
Ms.
think the last input is then briefly from Ayub Mohammed on the Environmental Management Inspectorate and Frontline, and then Minister can close out for us.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. I see you're already unmuted. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The environmental management inspectors in the department, together with the Department of Health and the City of Cape Town environmental health professionals, the EHPs, practitioners, we go out and we are doing compliance inspections at many of the healthcare facilities within the Western Cape, and this is in respect of the way healthcare risk waste must be treated. There's national guidelines that have come out from the National Department, and we also have the Western Cape Healthcare Waste Regulations. And it's important that that healthcare waste gets treated properly and gets handled properly. So what the officials will go out, and this is together with our Directorate Waste Management under the guidance of Gottlieb and Eddie Hannekom, they do these joint operations and they go out to these facilities, these healthcare facilities, both as the municipal facilities, municipal clinics, the day hospitals, etc., wherever there's COVID patients, wherever there's COVID testing that's taking place, and also to the provincial hospitals, also to the quarantine and the isolation facilities to see how the healthcare waste risk is being handled and also how general risk is being handled. So we've had 3 operations so far, one in May, one in June, and one in July, and it's been a very useful exercise because we've been able to inform the practices that have been put in place. So together with the Provincial Department of Health, we can then improve the way we are dealing with COVID waste. It's very important that this get treated properly and it get handled properly and it get disposed of properly because this it is a potential vector for the spreading of waste. We're also doing some inspections at the crematoria with Dr. Lena, who's also in the audience, because crematoria is one of the ways of dealing with the fatalities and the mortalities. And so we also need to make sure that the waste and the way the bodies, etc., and whatever's happening there is done according to the regulations and is done according to standard. So it's an exciting exercise that we've started since the beginning of the COVID pandemic. We've had good support and we've had good. It has taken a toll on some of the officials because what you see there is sometimes not very nice. But we've been successful, and we can do a presentation to the standing committee if they'd like that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Umar. I see your hand is raised.
Yes, Chair. I just got. Yes, it's around the infrastructure funding that was. During the last month of the financial year, it involved 16 contracts that couldn't be finalized during the last 3 weeks, and it amounts to approximately 17 million. So it's quite grave, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Umar. Mr. Mohammed, if I may, I've read that natural deaths at one stage were 60% higher than in the comparative months last year. Is that your experience? Because previously we received a presentation which said that some of our crematoria were undergoing repairs, etc. I know it's slightly off topic for today, but if you could just quickly confirm whether you have those figures.
I don't have those figures. Good. I'm not aware of those figures. Thanks.
Chair, if I could just come in, what we can do is, since the start of the national state of disaster, I think during the month of April, we started collating the weekly statistics for all the crematoria throughout the province. Dr. Lena and her team are responsible for collecting that information by weekly reports from each of the facilities. And by all means, I think if you're interested, we could make it comes out on a weekly basis, and we can send that through to Shireen for distribution to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you for that offer. And you indicated that we could give the last word to the MEC.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yeah, Chairperson, on crematoria, remember that we gave permission for the City of Cape Town to run their ovens 24/7. They're not there yet, so I think there's still enough capacity. With National Minister Creasy to keep a very close eye on this, so I think it's well under control. On the we need to go and look at the framework and the time that it was put in the Constitution. A lot has changed in the environmental framework. We've got today's Pluma, etc. And the problem, or something that we need to consider, expensive to run, and I personally don't think it will add any value, because they won't have any decision-making power.
Sorry, MEC, you are breaking up badly.
Okay, sorry. So, Chairperson, to just on the environmental, what is important personally that we need to look at when it was put in the Constitution and what has happened. Framework, a lot has changed. So personally, I don't think the office, because it won't be a person, it will be an office that we need. If anybody is unhappy with any decision, they can still go to the public protector. There's the court. Our environment. But saying that, it's an open debate and we will obviously need to discuss this going forward.
Minister Bradell, we've lost you.
Well, I can hear very clearly. Can you hear?
No, unfortunately, we're losing you continuously. I wonder if somebody sharing your internet connection is perhaps playing online games.
Online games?
Chairperson, just give me another second. Can you now hear me?
It sounds better, yes.
HOD and Dr. Omar and their teams for doing and keeping us on a very difficult time for them. They've put in long hours, and I think we can be proud of the achievements through to coastal management too. They've done sterling work, and I really want to thank all of them for their hard work, and thank you for the standing.
MEC is breaking up again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Minister. Unfortunately, as the recording will also show, we lost you from time to time, but thank you very much for your words. And the officials, Minister, you are excused if you would like to leave us. And honourable members, I now put to you the bill for consideration by the committee. Thank you, Honourable Maseku and Honourable Bartman. I see your hands. Honourable Maseku.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I propose that we support the adjustment budget.
Thank you, Honourable Maseku. Thank you, Honourable Bartman. Are there any other participants? None?
Yes, Chairperson. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Honourable Smith.
Chairperson,
you also
yes.
want to support? Yes?
No, Chair. I just want the committee to note the view of the minority not to support this bill. The budget, sorry. Just good budget.
Good. Thank you very much. Then I wonder, our procedural officer, Ms. Niekerk, would you be able to just put on the screen?
I'll do so, Chair.
Just a paragraph that will hopefully reflect the decisions as proposed.
There we go, Chairperson.
Thank you, Ms. Niekerk. That was quick. So, honourable members, as I have it, and I could read it to you, report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning on vote 9, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning in the schedule to the Western Cape Adjustments Appropriation, COVID-19 Bill 2020-2021 financial year, B4/2020, dated the 24th of July 2020 as follows. The Standing Committee, that's us, deliberated on the subject of vote 9, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning in the schedule in the Western Cape Adjustments Appropriation COVID-19 Bill 2021 financial year B4 2020, referred to in accordance with Standing Rule 188, reports that it supports the vote. In accordance with Standing Rule 90, the African National Congress expressed its minority view that it does not support the vote.
Chair, Member Herren is raising his hand.
Honourable Herren, thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you. At this stage, I'm going to abstain from either supporting or opposing. I need to consider the whole bill, and I haven't had a chance to do that. So I'm going to abstain at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Herren. Can I just say my impression is that abstention is not something that can be recorded in terms of the rules. Procedural Officer, will you please advise in this regard?
Yes, Chairperson, the minority view needs to be expressed, and abstention essentially is not a view. But what we can do is Member Herren's request to abstain could be then documented in our minutes.
Thank
That's
you.
an order. Thank you.
Honourable Herren. Thank you. Good.
Thank you.
So, honourable members, now with the report in front of us, and you see there on your screens the wording of the report, can I get a proposal that we adopt the report? I see Honourable Maseku's hand, and Honourable Herren, is your hand up again or from a previous time? Honourable Maseku?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. I support that we adopt the report as it stands in front of us, as you have read it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Maseku. Honourable Bartman?
Chair, I support.
Thank you. Is that then unanimously supported, that what is in front of us reflects the decisions of this committee?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much then. Thank you very much. Thank you, members, for your participation. I do know, and it's been expressed in other meetings as well, that these budgets, in terms of our rules, need to be decided upon within very, very tight time frames. And I do know that there are some members who have expressed a wish to also look at those rules. But for now, I want to say thank you very much to each and every one of you. Thank you for attending. Thank you for deliberating on this. And before I conclude, can I just ask, is there anybody else that has got something which they believe they need to add to the resolutions or to the meeting?
Yes,
None?
Chairperson.
Honourable
Chairperson,
Maseku?
can we get that presentation of Cape Nature? Did we have it? Did I miss it?
Aye. Procedural Officer, would you please assist? Would you be able to provide that to the members, or also upload it now afterwards on the MS Teams folder?
I actually don't have that presentation. I requested Chairperson, and then I'll upload it onto MS Teams.
Good.
Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So.
And
okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And honourable members, I believe I speak on behalf of us all. If I also thank Ms. Nikak for the very important and supporting role that she played in us being able to consider this. And I wish you all a wonderful weekend. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.